Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to talk about the junior doctors strike in its second day today, as people who sell coffee and sandwiches are given a pay rise, which now means they earn more than those doctors. This is not an exaggeration. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, what has been really remarkable about the strikes over the past year is not just how wide-ranging there are. There have been mass strikes in the past, not very frequently, but there have been in the past. What's remarkable now is just how many sectors have had to go on strike. Yeah, we've had barristers, now doctors, two professions not exactly in the habit of striking, as well as others who do so maybe once a generation or so. And it's all of them together. Junior doctors are the latest, and you can see from this chart how so many workers have suffered real terms pay cuts since the Tories took office in 2010. And although this chart doesn't show junior doctors specifically, doctors in general have been some of the worst affected. The situation is now so bad that you get paid more for selling sandwiches and coffee, something that doesn't require any qualifications, than people at the bottom end of the scale of a junior doctor's scale who spent years at university. Pret-a-Manger is now going to pay its staff £14.10 an hour, according to a report in the news. The same report showed that junior doctors earn £14.09. So a newly qualified doctor, you now earn less than an unqualified cafe worker. And consider something else here. So the Pret-a-Manger worker will work the hours they're paid for. There's the time they have to spend travelling to and from work. They don't get paid for that, but workers tend not to get paid for that. But essentially, they get paid for the work they do. Junior doctors don't. Their shifts will be longer than paid for because they're with a patient. They'll get shorter lunch times than is normally permitted because they'll be with a patient. They don't stop when their shift is over. But they stop when they've done with the patient after their shift is over. Also, they go home and study. A junior doctor won't stop being a junior doctor without passing exams which are a lot tougher than those taken to qualify in the first place. All of this is unpaid labour, with them having to pay as well for their continued study. So the actual pay of a junior doctor, when you take into account what they have to pay out for the professional development which they have to undertake, as well as the unpaid overtime they regularly do, means that their pay is even lower than the official figures suggest. And just as with all pay disputes, I urge people to focus on two things when you're considering whether or not you support these particular striking workers or not. Because the Tory media, when they report it at all, will try and muddy the waters. I remember when the issue of teachers' strikes had been reported, and one outlet, I forget which it was, tried to claim that the average pay of teachers was actually higher than the very top of the pay scale. Now, not sure that whoever published that understands how averages work. I mean, I spotted it straight away without having to check because I've been a teacher recently enough to still be familiar with the pay scales. I instantly thought that average is more than any classroom teacher's being paid. But unless they were a manager. But they did the same thing with RMT rail workers. They kept posting figures about the average salary of train drivers. But the RMT rail workers aren't train drivers. That's ASLEF. And given how they reported on teachers' pay, I'm going to guess that even those figures were about as reliable as a Boris Johnson promise. And sure enough, I've seen the same thing with junior doctors. Again, I saw somewhere a figure quoted for the average pay. Now, I'm not familiar with junior doctors' pay scale, so I had to check it out. And sure enough, this average was higher than the top of the scale. But the average or the top of the scale pay is irrelevant. Two things to pay attention to in any pay disputes, and the reason that dishonest journalists and commentators will post these inflated salary figures, which are either misleading or just falsified. If they're trying to say the average is above the very top of the scale, that is falsified, is because of something I discussed recently in polling. YouGov found, there's a lot of strikes been going on, and they found that one of the big factors in public support, because the public support some striking workers, not so much others, one of the big factors is how low the workers' standard of living is perceived to have dropped. So it's in the interests of the Tories and their client media to try and convince the public that their salaries are actually much higher than they really are. Yeah, they're taking a real terms pay cut, but they can still easily afford the cost of living. Hence the efforts to conflate train drivers with other rail workers, or to make up average salaries that are higher than even the top of the scale, or to publish average salaries at all. The average salary is neither here nor there when considering how urgent a pay dispute needs attention. So two things I would urge people to consider. First, how the pay has varied over a sustained period of time. Because the odd real terms pay cut when the economy is weak is one thing. You sort of accept that. Should it happen still? I'd still say in most cases probably not. I would certainly say not if profits are still up and if dividends are still up, then really the wages should be keeping pace. But you sort of accept that every 15, 20 years, there's going to be a really bad time. And for a couple of years, maybe you take a bit of a real terms pay cut. But you have to ask yourself, has the real terms pay been maintained or enhanced over the longer term, between the recessions? The answer is no. And if the answer is no, then you have a pay dispute. The major problem we have across our economy, in the public sector most especially, is that wages have been going down in real terms for the decade before jolts like COVID or Russia's war came along. They had already been going down. That means living standards have been going down. So it wasn't that they were going up for a bit and then went down for a bit more, and then after we recover, we'll go up again. So what happened was they were already taking very severe pay cuts, then got hit with massive inflation, but still had the very low pay increases, which means a real terms pay cut. If their wages had been growing in real terms over the past decade, then this real terms pay cut came along, you wouldn't be having all these strikes because it wouldn't be that bad. The standard of living would drop a bit, but people, if they can still get by, they're not going to strike. But that wasn't possible here because the standard of living had already been falling. Then it was smashed down even further. The Tories haven't had to preside over a rocky period of international economic shocks. It was running a stagnant economy for the decade before all this happened. Second thing to consider when you're sort of thinking, oh, do I think that they've got a really good claim to strike, considering the cost of living? Look at the bottom of the pay scale. The top or the average don't matter, even if published accurately. The bottom of the scale is all important because those people have to live. They have bills to pay. They need food, clothes, transport, leisure for their labours. It's no good telling junior doctors on the bottom of the scale what the average salary is, even if they report the correct figure. They don't earn the average. They earn the bottom rate. They can't tell their landlords, oh, sorry, I can't pay the full whack, but look at my average salary. Wait a few years, it'll be fine. No, they have to pay the full cost of their living on the salary they have at that time. And the bottom rate is lower than workers for a well-known cafe. Now ask yourselves this, why would a chain of cafes be paying their staff an increased rate? Because they understand the cost of living means that those workers need higher pay. And because they value and want to retain their staff. So what does it say about the government that they will allow vital workers like doctors to have their pay fall behind like this? That they don't care whether they can afford the cost of living or not, and they don't care if they leave those jobs to go and work elsewhere. In fact, the reason a private business is more likely to pay their staff properly, the reason why private sector pay is way above public sector pay, even proportionally, not just as a raw figure, is because they understand the business benefits of having staff who are not worried about being able to afford the cost of basic bills, because that distraction makes them less productive. And because that business wants to be able to retain their experienced and motivated staff who understand the business and will be more productive than if you keep allowing staff to leave and getting new ones in and having to train them up. And the decision makers want their businesses to succeed because their success is tied to the success of the business. The government, on the other hand, do not want the NHS to succeed. They want it to fail, and they want it to fail hard. They want it to fail so badly that just as with Brexit, a wearied public will eventually go on then, privatise it, it's got to be better than this, even though the idea sounds mad. So the government wants NHS staff to be worried about their bills or to be not fed properly, so they're less productive at work. They want staff to leave to reduce the productivity of the service still further, to put more strain on those left behind so that they're less productive themselves. Putting the Tories in charge of the NHS is like putting the owner of McDonald's in charge of Burger King. Of course they're going to wreck it. They don't want it to succeed. Just as with nurses, the junior doctors are fighting for their own living standards, which is reason enough to strike, but also for the NHS itself. I mean, Conservatives are all about market forces, aren't they? They must accept that if pay is not competitive, you will not attract the best workers, or if the pay is really bad, any at all. There's been a net reduction in the number of NHS workers, which has sat alongside the net reduction in real terms wages over the years. The message is not only loud and clear, but this is a message that is completely in tune with Conservative thinking. Pay them more and you go a long way to fixing the staffing issues. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.